Welcome to the committee of conference hosted by the House Environment Committee of S.325. I think since it's a new configuration of members, we should just introduce ourselves. Start Representative Labor.
Byron Labor, Representative Orleans as District 1.
That's right. That's right. Seth Logos from the Bennington Senate District.
Ann Watson with the Washington Senate District.
Terry Williams, the Rutland District.
Ella Chapin, I represent Montclair and Middlesex.
Amy Sheldon, I represent Middlebury. And our legislative council.
Ellen Tchaikovsky, opposite legislative council.
I think what I'll do is we have a side by side. I think just high level, go through the big changes and then come back and talk about the issues that folks are drawn to mind. So the very beginning is the repeal. So I think important to remember the bill started in the Senate with some date extensions, became primarily a vehicle for repealing the road rule in Tier 3. It's the focus of it. Some other things have been added, but that's kind of why we're here. So let's keep that in mind as we go through. Next thing was that the Senate, in extending the dates, we actually brought those dates back in. And I'll ask Representative Labor and Representative Chapin to help me out some, but essentially what we did was, in looking at that, since your dates extended to the extension of the road rule on Tier 3, we felt like we got a lot of feedback on tiers and a reluctance around tiers broadly, that it made sense to bring the housing exemptions into a year after the regional planning projects or regional planning maps would be updated, to give towns a chance who want to opt in to 1A and 1B to do that.
Thank you. That's helpful.
We did remove one of the housing amendments that was made on the floor of the Senate, in large part because it was focused on towns without zoning and subdivision bylaws, and those towns are not eligible actually for 1A or 1B, and it doesn't actually seem fair to me, given feedback we were getting about surprising communities with major changes to land use, to keep that one in. Which page? Oh, I'm not sure exactly. Sorry, I was just sticking at high level dates. I wasn't. That's okay. I'm just going through. Oh, sure. So then you get to the Tier 3 rulemaking, which of course is removed. So that's saying. And then also in response to significant input we received, we have done two big things. One is creating a public engagement plan process for moving forward to talk with Vermonters about how to address some of the issues that the road rule and Tier 3 were trying to address. I would say that Ella did a lot of work on that section of the bill. And then also we created a joint oversight committee to, some folks don't like the word oversight, but we have a number of standing oversight committees. Legislative Council looked at the structure of those and broadly formed this one around that, and then we refined it. And I know you have some thoughts on that, so we'll hear those after. And the concept really is about better communication between the legislature and the Land Use Review Board, and also the Agency of Natural Resources. You may have heard some of the floor debate yesterday even about permitting, maybe some of the ways things happen. My vision for this committee, this legislative oversight committee, is that it will be able to address more in real time some of the issues that come up, and also just, like I said, be a conduit for communication. There's boundaries around it. The number of meetings are limited, I think, to 6. We went from 8 to 6, and it sunsets. so that a future legislature can decide if it's an effective use of time and money. We have kept the intent and changed a bit of the details around the land use review board that were reports that were coming back to us. And the energy compliance parts of it are brought in because they were in another bill.
H40.
Yeah,
Yep.
so you are familiar with them.
Mhm.
We were less familiar with them, but there they are. Yeah, that's a lot of that. And then, yeah, the rest were what I would deem technical cleanup language from the transition that we are going through with regional planning primarily. And let's. It does speak to another report back on a review of the housing. So another piece of the housing exemptions for me is having a pause or just the reporting back so that we can find out what kind of housing is being built and where and for whom. And is it really getting at this need that we have for housing? Is it meeting the needs of Vermonters? So that's another reason for the dates coming in, but the report is actually due in 2027. So a future legislature will have time to decide if the housing exemptions are actually helping to address the gap in housing that we need. And we also were asked to line up the environmental justice, kind of rearrange the way that they were doing their work and give them some date extension. I think that's the summary overview.
Guess I'll just add that we had a couple of floor amendments okay, in this.
Yeah, accessory on-farm business is the very, it's at the very beginning.
It's at the very beginning. Okay, thanks. I missed that.
Yeah. And an amendment to the smart growth principles. That's the floor.
Is that one?
It adds in homesteading. Yeah. Great. Yeah. So. Super. Yeah.
Thank you. That is super helpful, especially as we go back to talk to the Senate about the changes that were made. So that's great. Did you have a next step in mind or?
I'd love to hear back from you. I know you've had time with it.
So I, having looked at the side by side quite a bit, I have some suggestions. I have some thoughts to share. I've asked Legislative Council to put them together in a draft. So I do have something that we could look at that would outline some of the things that I would love to propose to counter change, I suppose. Would now be the appropriate time to do that?
Yes.
Okay. Unless others have things you'd like to share.
I just wanted to flag quickly, the two floor amendments that were in the House version are on page 3 and then 26. The House's in the House's column.
Side by side, I first thought didn't have numbers because they're hidden.
Some of them are hidden by the staples.
They're there.
They are.
Huzzah. Okay, so I'm going to attempt to walk through some of this. I may have some other questions later, but for now, would love to use this to look at some possibilities. So this is drafted as, I suppose, further change proposals, instances of amendment. So the first one is in section 9, which is about the plan for engagements. was thinking about, I did hear some feedback about like what does like I think the House version uses the word to be being neutral on policy and political issues and neutral facilitation. And I thought that that could use a little bit more specificity, like what are we talking about? And so so I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I think it's probably hopefully clear here that we're not presupposing outcomes or taking positions. Whoever's running this shouldn't be presupposing outcomes or taking positions politically. So hopefully that is clear enough on that. And then again, instead of saying neutral, just saying nonpartisan, like we're just trying to stay away from the politics of it. Like we're staying out of that. So that's at least how I was reading that and suggesting that. Then further down under, by the way, on the side by side, I'm on page 10, but further down it says the risks of losing working lands, both agriculture and forest land. I think this is great. I love that this is included in here. But I would also add, in addition to wanting to know about these are kinds of lands that are at risk, and these are at high risk, and these are at low risk. Like I actually want to know what are the drivers of that loss or that potential loss. And so would love to be able to dig a little bit deeper and to get, under this, the first layer, so to speak, to try to understand those causes. So I've added, and the causes for those risks. So that I am hoping is a friendly amendment there. And then further, equitable, in number 2, it says equitable, efficient, and effective regulatory or non-regulatory tools to protect these working lands and critical natural resources. I also thought, I was thinking about how people, especially in rural Vermont, are stewards of the land and want to steward the land, and how sometimes to that end there are barriers and there's reasons that becomes really hard. And so so I added and barriers to land stewardship. So just thinking about what gets in the way for people when they are trying to do their best to steward their land. So that's another change. Again, by the way, I'm offering all of this in the spirit of like, if you don't like it, like happy to talk about it. And it's also easier to strike than add. But anyway, so that's second instance of amendment. Third one, kind of cruising. Okay.
Cruising's good.
Cruising faster. No, okay, all right. Okay. So the next, the third instance of amendment here I've got is in relation to the oversight committee. So I think this is, that's on page 11. So there we are. Okay. I feel like this is my own fault. At one point I did say like, oh yeah, 2 is probably fine. I've come to understand that it should be the same for the House and the
I just
Senate.
want you to show up.
No, that's fair. That's fair. I agree.
And I
gotta
just
show
want to
up.
say that it was offered in acknowledgement of the fact that there are 30 senators asked to do the same amount of committee work broadly as the House. It was not to be construed as a slight. Happy to have you there. I just want you to show up.
Yeah, that's
Because I know you're busier than we are.
in any case, so moves from 2 members of the Senate to 3, and that working backwards means that there's got to be 6 members in total. And then therefore also the 4th instance of amendment is that the quorum now is 4 instead of 3. So there's a set of changes associated with that. On that one. And then 5th, okay. 5th instance of amendment. Oh, okay. One of the, this is in the duties part of this. Again, this may actually be captured in the language that you have, but one of the things that that's a theme that seemed to come up was about the interpretation of the statute. And so, maybe that is implied in in the implementation of statutes, but I thought it would be just as well to call it out as that the oversight committee would also potentially be involved in helping to interpret the statutes, like what did we mean when we said these things? So calls that out specifically. Sixth,
So it says regarding implementation and.
yes, yes.
Nitpick. Probably better to have interpretation before implementation.
Oh. So it's.
Open to open.
Um,
Okay. Okay, I'm gonna keep going. Sixth, there was, as I understand it, was a floor amendment to add to the
Principles.
thank you, the smart growth principles. So let me just catch up.
26.
26. Trying to navigate both documents at the same time. Okay, 26. So there was an amendment to serves to strengthen agriculture and forest industries, and then the amendment was to including homesteading, small scale agriculture and forestry, supporting housing while minimizing conflicts, etc. I am fine with all of that. I think the thing that I was like having just some dissonance about like and supporting housing, but like this bullet point was about ag and forestry, and so I just needed that to relate back to ag and forestry, not like and housing sort of separately as a standalone thing. Like that was, I needed it to connect. And so
Or lowering healthcare costs.
yeah, right, like and do something
Want to be
else.
connected.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm suggesting that we add and supporting on farm and farm worker housing. So that's a possibility there. Seventh, I think this is a technical amendment. Because in the Community Investment Board's report, which was on our side by side is on page 30. We're just missing a verb, like an action. So under in section 20, under number 1, summary of the community investment program's activities. And then it says including designations, steps, or other actions. I was like, designations and steps are not actions. So we're just clarifying this, which municipalities received designation or new step. So hopefully that is not particularly big deal. 8th is okay, this is also in the report. This is in the report on municipal appeals report. In your new number 5, I think it's great. I love that this exists in general. I think this will be really important data. And to add to that, would love to, I think adding the number of units, that was just a technical addition, as well as where the units were constructed. But I wanted to add, the reason this got my attention was the type of units. So with these exemptions, like, what are we creating with this? Are we creating more vacation rentals, or are we creating more affordable housing, or like, what are we doing? And I think that type of information, the information about the types would be helpful.
No, you could interpret the word types differently
Okay.
and be like. So,
Price is also in there, I'll just say, because I think the House committee did talk about this.
Oh, okay.
And so, but I do think having both of those pieces of information will
where
help.
you want to go, but types of housing could mean.
Number
Most
of
of them.
bedrooms, yeah.
Could be what?
Supposed to be more, but like, I don't mean to be.
Like
but
that, that's not.
We want to make clear what we're actually talking about. In a way, what we're trying to get at is building housing that is used for, that is affordable housing, long-term rental, short-term rental, you know, that's what we're trying to get at. So we need to say that to make sure that that's what the way it gets translated. Maybe it will,
I like
maybe it's.
saying what we mean.
And is there a more specific way?
We could ask for that data, affordable short-term rent.
Long-term rentals.
Long-term rentals.
So the number of affordable market rate.
Yeah.
Sure, yeah.
Market rate.
Mm-hmm.
Short-term rental.
Start.
Okay.
Long-term rental, I can think of those five.
Oh, we also want to know if it's single family or multi.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah, okay.
yeah.
Hmm. Okay. Thank you.
So I'm more concerned with any part of the Senate that we sent to you that you deleted. If we can go over those
Mhm.
and
Yeah,
just touch on them.
well, let's keep.
Okay, yeah. keep
'Cause
going
we're
what you're
still-
going on,
yeah.
yep.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, so the ninth instance of amendment is, I think, part that might be of interest to folks. I understand that there was this other amendment about accessory on-farm businesses.
This one's on page 3.
Yeah, so going backwards a little bit.
Yes, all the other ones are in order, but this one,
This one was not.
the life.
Yeah. Um,
3 and 4.
yes, so I guess so about this accessory on-farm business piece, I am very sympathetic, and I'd actually hoped to have some conversation over the summer about this specifically. But here we are, we have this potential change here. As with so many floor amendments, I think it's often the case where, there's often like more work that could be done to look at that. And it is kind of a thorny topic. Again, as I understand it, there is another report due back to the legislature about accessory on-farm businesses, which I think is due back November, which is so delightfully soon. So, but I say that because that means that we might have some fodder for, legislation next year. But I'm interested in keeping the spirit of this and wanting to preserve the kinds of activities that I think we want to allow to happen, but be reasonable about, like, or I guess I would say be conscious of the fact that anytime you're making an exemption, that abuse could happen. And so, I guess I think of the situation where, like, I mean, I've heard from a lot of farms that are like, this would be helpful to me. And like, that's like, okay, I want to help you. But I think about the situations where, like, you have what's really a hotel, but they don't want to go through Act 250. And so they, or you see what I'm saying? Like they just also have some, like a goat or something, you know what I mean? And then as a result, don't have to get an Act 250 permit. But I want to honor farms that are farms and are trying to do this. And so anyway, that's the spirit in which I'm offering this. And so it starts with a sunset to that this language would stay in place until July 1st of 2027. And open about that in my mind, having a sunset just means that forces the conversation to happen next year. And that's I would say is a welcome conversation. But open to, suggestions about that. And then that you don't need a permit. Okay, unless than one, if less than one parcel of land or 1 acre of land is physically altered, and the types of events include concerts, farm stays with fewer than 5 dwelling units. And then to qualify this exemption of the business cannot have noise greater than 70 decibels at property boundaries and continue past 10 p.m. And then just to finish out this language here, for the purposes of the subsection, to feature agricultural practices or qualifying products means host farms agricultural practices or its qualifying products are a substantial component of any event that the business hosts. And this language came from a bill that was already in process in 2024. I believe it was H1 28. So that language was a little bit different, but that's where this language comes from. And again, it's a place to start. I did look up 70 decibels, that is a roughly the amount, that's like the hum of a washing machine. Just for reference. Yeah, and just thinking about like, yeah.
Whose washing machine.
That's a good question. I don't know. Or I think it might have also said like a dishwasher. Take that for what it's worth. Everybody's washing machines are different.
Can you summarize you're gonna add, you wanna add this?
That's
In
my
more
proposal.
detail.
Yeah.
For the same amount of time, the sunset.
Yeah, well, and thinking about this as like a place to start, like putting some guardrails around the exemption. And, you know, especially if you're gonna make an exemption, like to make it not annoying to the neighbors and that, with noise particularly, but open to discussion on this and again, anticipating that we would need to have more conversation next year. Like I said, would welcome that. So again, this is a place to start. Happy to have more thoughts, disagreement.
Thank you for doing this.
Yes. Hopefully, this is a thing I like to do.
Right. Okay, so I mean, I guess I have a couple questions on that. We spent a fair amount of time with acres physically altered on a different section.
Oh, okay.
And I guess, Ellen, I need you to remind me so is this the actual movement of dirt?
Yes.
Total of acre?
Yes.
And fewer than 5 dwelling units who interprets this statute if it's an exemption?
There could be enforcement challenges to it that would be brought to the land use review board. These changes are being only made to the Act 250 statute, not the municipal zoning statute. So there will be a distinction between the requirements for those two things. So it would be the land use review board in response to complaints that may occur. But a landowner would need to interpret this in order to move forward without getting a permit. So they also could ask the board or the district coordinator for a JO based on this.
Also, reading this language, not yours, but the way it passed, talks about the construction of improvements. It never actually talks about whether you can actually do the uses.
Well, that's because the general jurisdictional triggers of Act 250 are tied to construction. And events themselves may not trigger Act 250. The things that trigger Act 250 generally are construction.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So if somebody wanted to build a farm stand on their farm to sell their produce. Do we need to put parameters in there for what size building could be built?
No, so actually that farm stands are already exempt from Act 250 under the first part of the language, which is what is being called T1.
Oh, okay.
So I've been thinking about this for a while, since the floor amendment passed. And I've had a lot of conversations. And I think that there's a lot of agreement that the way it stands as passed on the floor of the House isn't really a definition. Like there's a lack of a solid definition, which creates potentially creates statutory ambiguity around this events exemption. But I've also experienced having sort of like talked to a lot of people in this room and beyond this room over the last 3 weeks about ideas. I've had a lot of different ideas that some of mine, some of other people's around like how to put some guardrails on events. And again, we're just talking about constructing a building for events. That I think just leave me feeling like a lot of this language is challenging. And this is probably why for 12 years we've been trying to address this, and we're still struggling with how to draw lines around what kinds of events facilities should be exempt from Act 250 and which shouldn't. And I think that this is challenging. I think that I like some of the language. I think some of this language from H128 that isn't necessarily a threshold like 1 acre or 70 decibels, I think makes sense to add. I'm not sure actually how much it actually helps with the definition, but I think it gets a little bit at least at our legislative intent. I struggle with the 1 acre. I struggled with like event scale. I talked about, numbers of events per year and, things that people have been bringing up for a decade or more. And I did hear a lot of positive feedback about pushing the effective date back a year and giving some time for municipalities to make sure their ordinances are in order to get at some of these parameters in a more local way, as opposed to trying to do it through the exemption. And I guess I'll just share that I think that there's a lot of support for that path, as opposed to us trying in the last days of the legislative session to articulate what is an on-farm event. I don't love that we did this through a floor amendment because of the statutory ambiguity, but I also am excited that we're making maybe another step in this direction for farms. And I think that it's, I wish we could have done more of this work earlier. And for various reasons, there's been other big priorities. So I guess I just want to say, I think I like the idea of putting some parameters on this and maybe either doing a sunset or pushing the date out. But right now I'm sort of settling on I don't think the 1 acre or the, I don't know, I feel less concerned about noise and time, particularly the 1 acre, I think feels like an arbitrary thing that's going to be really limiting and on farms. And we could get into like whether it includes parking or not, but like that's the problem.
So
with some of
is
it.
there any rulemaking requirement? Which agency is responsible for rulemaking?
Well, I guess I'm gonna step back a second and appreciate the question, but I'll say we didn't take any testimony on this. So I'm not sure, but for me, I'm uncomfortable with it because my head is not in it. I've had years in this body where my head was fully into this conversation. Was looking forward to having the professional land use review board come back with recommendations to it. So I think, yes, we need to honor the change that was made, but we also need to make sure we do it with, I think we need to be careful. And then as far as who does rulemaking for an exemption, there would be no rulemaking. There's no rulemaking. Rulemaking is one avenue that could have been in the report back to us in November 15th. That could address the nuance of this, which is real. That's why, and I'll say it's been an evolving conversation and things have gotten, I think it's improved, but it is still outstanding.
I think about living been getting built and the neighbors. It's at 2 a.m. and God knows, and that all you have to do is, I don't know, source 1 cog and qualify. Came from the garden. I think it's a little scary even for a short duration of what could happen. And I really am, like everybody in this room, I'm really sympathetic and true on-farm businesses. I'm for, but not completely frankly, the way this is written, you can drive a bulldozer through it. You can do anything you want. And just with a little tiny bit of pretending that has some connection to agriculture. And you can have an entirely second business that's unpermitted and imposes a lot on neighbors. So I think just pushing back the effective date doesn't work for me. I think we need to give it some definition, and if it ends up that the board, after doing its work, comes back with a recommendation that actually it's whatever, we can look at that. But I think in the short run, got to put some guardrails. It's going to be some people could really regret that we did this to them. That's
So sorry, you're suggesting push back the implementation date and try and refine the language further.
yeah, to at least try to refine the language, and it really, and I think since it happened with the Florida, then I don't feel guilty about doing it, doing something quickly. Just bring it down to some scale that has some relationship to a true on-farm accessory business. So I don't know how to do it quickly. I think what you then talk about is something that I would support.
I want to keep it in, but I want parameters. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm okay with that. You can develop some parameters thing.
Well, this is why we're here. I don't know what the parameters would be. I think, Ellen, the way the existing statute was, how was it limiting on-farm business?
So currently in statute, if you look at the language that's at the bottom of page 4 into page 5, there's 3 sentences in the exemption for under
The impasse version of the bill? Or
No,
you're
in
the amendment. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, so for Act 250 purposes, there is an exemption, and that exemption has 3 different sentences to address 3 categories of accessory on-farm business. There are 2 categories, but for purposes of the exemption, they've been broken into 3. So I put them into their own subdivision so it's easier to see. So T1, this is an exemption for the construction of improvements for the sale or the storage or sale of farm products, and the other enumerated products, which are baked goods and merchandise. And so this is sort of classically a farm stand. Those historically have already been exempt under Act 250 because they're also part of the definition of farming. Storage and sale is part of the definition of farming. The second sentence is the value added step. And so accessory on-farm businesses also include a business for the preparation or processing of the qualifying products. But this has a further requirement, which is that provided that more than 50% of the total annual sales of the prepared or qualifying product come from product produced on the farm where the business is located. And so this is another aspect that was discussed quite a bit about it requires at least 50% come from the products from that farm itself. And the unit there has been debated before. It's currently in statute annual sale, although other dollar numbers or weight have been considered previously. And then the third sentence says that currently there is no exemption for the events category of accessory on-farm business. And as I mentioned, some of them are already not under Act 250 jurisdiction because holding an event itself does not necessarily trigger Act 250. It's when there's construction that triggers it. So construction of improvements for an event for an accessory on-farm business currently may trigger an Act 250 permit.
So every municipality could have a different, if they had an ordinance, they would have to set a.
So currently, there is a separate statute for municipal zoning related to accessory on-farm business treatment. It currently says that a business that qualifies as an accessory on-farm business, the municipality can't zone out. They have to allow them. They do have site plan review authority, which is just the basic traffic signage, lighting, screening. But they can't prohibit in their zoning accessory on farm businesses.
And towns that don't have any zoning would have no.
No say currently, yeah.
And under Act 250, if they were applying for something like a building to do weddings or have concerts, the district commission would look at things like, then they would look at things like noise and frequency and
Yes.
some of those things that others would be. But under this, there's just nothing.
There would be no review, yes. There may be some at the town level, but not in the Act 250 process, because it wouldn't be there.
And not if it's meets a definition of accessory on farm business, it would just be limited to those site
Right.
things that you just listed.
Yes, and so site plan review is only a limited number of things. It does not cover noise.
But at the municipal level.
Correct.
So that's a reason to leave these two parameters in the exemption that do address noise. Can you talk about what scale construction would trigger an Act 250 permit? You know,
Sure, so there are 10 jurisdictional triggers under Act 250 or 11, depending on how we move forward, but the classic ones are for commercial or industrial purposes in a 1 acre town, a town without zoning, construction on a parcel that is more than 1 acre. In a 10 acre town, a town with zoning, it's construction for the commercial or industrial purpose on a parcel that is 10 or more acres. And so that is the default currently. And here we are talking about farms. So farms under farming under 2,500 feet in elevation is exempt from Act 250. And there are provisions in statute that identify that if a commercial development is going to happen on a site otherwise used for farming purposes, Act 250 attaches only to the portion of the parcel for that development. But the whole parcel size is what triggers Act 250 in those circumstances. And so it would be about if there was construction happening on a parcel more than 1 acre or more than 10 acres.
Which is a large part of why we're in this conversation. Those farms are by definition usually bigger than 1 or 10 acres. Percent of labor.
Sure. I go to Senator Watson's review, page 5, 5th line. I know what the intent is, but the way it's worded, they want to consider changing verbiage. Farm stays with less with farm stays with 5 cottages or less, because we've already had testimony from 2 parties that have 5 separate cottages. So,
So 5,
because the way it's worded right now, the interpretation, my part would be 4.
yes, I agree. So we could switch it to 5 or fewer.
Yes.
Yeah. See what you're saying. I'm fine. Thank you.
I'd say if we keep the 1 acre language, I really think we should exclude.
Mhm.
You say that again?
If we keep the 1 acre language on page 5, line 2, I think it needs to exclude parking. Sometimes parking might just be on the grass, so they're not actually disturbing any soil to make parking. If it's a larger venue for the occasional, bus turnaround because they're having school groups, then you're talking about quite a bit of acreage for a bus turnaround. I would just say, I think that that's just such an anomaly from project to project and farm to farm that I would exclude it. I know that's a departure from that language.
Yeah. I would be, interested in the thoughts of others, but I am tentatively okay with that. But I think it gets to for me, it's coming back to this larger question of we decide on some parameters. Either we're pushing it out, we're having an effective date starting next year, or we are sunsetting it. Either way, we need more conversation. So in a way, I think I might actually be going against what my own suggestion is here, because let's suppose that we put something into place now, we exclude parking, we don't exclude parking. Let's say we get it wrong. Not that there is such a thing here exactly, but there's something that we don't like eventually, or we get feedback that people don't like. If there's a trade-off in terms of like, if it starts now, but then it sunsets, then that allows opportunity for something to happen now that maybe couldn't happen before, versus if we set it out in the future, then we have time to get feedback on whatever we've got here and have the opportunity to tweak it. And I feel like the theme of what I heard through the larger discourse on this bill and Act 21 in general was the need for more discourse, or not just discourse, I'm sorry, the need for more input. And so actually putting it out, having a future effective date rather than a sunset would be more in the spirit of like, here's the status quo, like, tell us what you think about it. Like, yeah.
I mean, in reaching out, hearing from people, to me, given that we're in a committee of conference on a bill that's addressing other significant things, I felt like having it implement a year later felt like a sense of relief of like, okay, we're honoring this, but we're also giving space for the conversation.
I think we want to narrow it in the short run, narrow it as well. Push it out. And then-
I don't have the language to narrow, which is why I wanted the LURB report to come back.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking about, that's what I want.
And we avoid that if we,
Narrow it for the default, but then we have the Word report coming in and we think it.
yeah.
I just have a question for legislative council. If we took out the 1 acre and we left the rest of the language as is, and we, instead of the sunset, we push it out a year. Is it your opinion that we are putting some guardrails on this and limiting the particularly the kinds of examples that Senator Watson brought up of somebody sort of buying land and having a token little agricultural project over here, but really building a wedding venue or a concert venue or a hotel? Are there some guardrails here for those kinds of situations?
I don't have an answer for that. It really is policy. And I mean, yeah.
Meaning you don't see an improvement between what was passed on the floor and this version in terms of avoiding that kind of a scenario?
I'm not saying that. I have no comment on that. I don't think I can advise you if these are the appropriate or improved parameters.
I have a separate question with coming back to the 1 acre thing, because if you were going to be building larger than 1 acre, it would trigger Act 250 anyway. No, I guess not if it's farm.
Parcel.
It's parcel
Size,
size.
not
Parcel size. Thank you. Okay. Digesting.
And where did this definition number 4 come from?
Definition in number 4.
Food agricultural practices or qualifying products.
Act 1. I think
Yeah, the PH 128.
Didn't pass.
it did pass House Ag and then came to your committee and parts of it got utilized for Act 181 and parts of it did not move.
Take all of this and put it into a draft.
I think I'm proposing that we change this to, instead of a sunset, that it's a future effective date. And put it out to starting July 1st of 2027. I mean, I would rather have this than not. And also including Representative Labor's suggestion about 5 or fewer.
Thank you. The blurb did send out a pretty comprehensive various sections that they would see improvements made on using their language. They want to have a separate meeting after everybody's had the opportunity to read it. I just stopped.
I saw it.
They suggested July 2028.
Oh, 2 years out.
Probably more realistic, but,
That was in relationship to them doing rulemaking on this.
Oh.
And I
So
personally,
I have a question. I think there's some farm businesses are actually doing this already. So we're potentially putting a restriction on what people have already been doing. And I like sunsets because if you, what do you do if you don't have any complaints? So people just do what they do and nobody makes a complaint. The sunset makes you go back and revisit that.
well, I guess
Oh.
some of these things are being litigated now.
But,
So there's already some conflicts.
Oh, yeah.
Folks that
Yeah.
trying to. Yeah, so, yeah. Yeah.
one of the big reasons that I heard articulated to do, to not do a sunset, but to give it a year is really because we have 60 to 100 municipalities who don't have ordinances now for events. And it gives time for the RPCs or VLCT to support municipalities in preparing for this level of change, because again, even if we put a 1 acre limit on this, a 1 acre can hold quite a big venue. And
under Act 181, depending on what you use for a parking lot, that could trigger impervious surface. You know.
sure, there's other permits that would be needed.
Not under Access 50.
Not Act
No,
181.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, you mean stormwater or
Right.
there's other things. So I guess I just would say that if, I think that if we, I don't know what I was saying. I guess I'm just trying to say, I think that there's a number of goals that are achieved by putting an effective date out a year. That support municipalities, give us time to think a little bit more and get the LURPs report.
I actually like going with what the LURB said, gives you another year.
Oh.
And then, you know, gets away from the sunset. Gives us time.
We need to do a little logistics with you. I assume you're going to another committee call. When are you available again? 6 tonight. Okay, we may need to reconvene.
I need a 6.
Although we meet tomorrow morning.
God, I'll clear.
Tomorrow afternoon.
Yes.
He's in the big short.
Yes, tomorrow afternoon, if you can get dispensation.
Yeah, we can.
I think we could lead that one. So if you can get dispensation, if you can, we don't have, we'll be good.
Yeah, one would probably be safe.
Yeah.
But, so I could also, I'm sorry, I heard 6 also.
I really can't.
You can't. Okay.
Okay.
Feels like we have maybe a direction to,
I have a couple comments on your other things, but I'm generally supportive of them.
it's welcome.
Great if we got to the point that we could have a draft.
Oh, so this is a draft. So conference committee reports can take a few different shapes. I drafted this as instances of amendment because it is the shortest version. However, if it would be helpful, because the Senate floor will not have seen all of the House's proposal, you could do a strike all. But this is based as this, Senator Watson's proposal was based as accepting the House and then amending it slightly. You have other options too. I also could include more language with each of these amendments if it would be helpful to read. So if
I think we need to stick with this format for now and decide what we're gonna agree on first. And I guess meet again tomorrow.
Yep.
Miriam, can you help us with that? Great, thank you. All right, so we're gonna adjourn for the afternoon on this committee, but I don't know yet, because we have to talk about the one we didn't get to.
All right.